Hello again, friends. Jacob with Mad Crazy Reviews. I'm smiling because I seem to be stuck finding different locations to do all of these videos, and that was completely not my intention. But hey, we got to roll with the punches, make it work. So we're doing another director spotlight. This time we are talking about Guy Ritchie, of all people. I know, kind of an odd choice to follow up after Orson Welles, but I've got some strong feelings, and let's go with it. This is my thing. I'm going to try and make it work, and hopefully you find it interesting. So, Guy Ritchie has been active for a while now. First movie came out in 1998, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and then he's been pretty steadily cranking things out almost every year since. So, I'm just going to run through the filmography, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit more conceptually and thematically. So like I said, 1998, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, 2000, Snatch, 2002, Swept Away, 2005, Revolver, 2008, Rock'n'Rolla, 2009, Sherlock Holmes, 2011, Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows, 2015, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., 2017, King Arthur, Legend of the Sword, 2019, Aladdin, 2019, The Gentleman, 2021, Wrath of Man, 2023, Operation Fortune, Ruse de Guerre, 2023, Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, 2024, The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. And he's got another one out this year in 2025, I believe, called The Fountain, maybe? I'm not entirely sure on that one. So, a busy guy. Got his start. It sounds like kind of similar to those, maybe pseudo-apocryphal stories you hear about Steven Spielberg, where he just kind of was like hanging around and very persistent, and someone eventually gave him a chance, and he, I think, started in commercials and music videos, and then kind of scrounged up funding to do Lock, Stock. Started with these kind of crime comedies. That's mostly what he's known for. Even his most commercially successful, the Sherlock Holmes movies, they're very much crime comedies, wrapped up in the steampunk mystery Sherlock Holmes aesthetic, but they're still his version of a PG-13 crime comedy. Now, that said, why Guy Ritchie is probably what you're wondering, especially after Orson Welles and how I expressed, all this admiration and inspiration for this classical filmmaker. It's because for a while Guy Ritchie was one of my favorite filmmakers. When I had started working, one of my first job when I was 16 was at a local movie theater, small 6 screens. They could only show kind of what they thought would be the big hits because they didn't want to take a financial risk on something, maybe an independent film or foreign film, something like that. But I had seen trailers for Snatch, thought it looked entertaining, so saved up, had a car with that first job, and then went to a different movie theater to watch Snatch and just fell in love with it. And I still, to this day, have a special place in my heart for that movie. I've seen it many, many times. I hadn't at the time, I was 16 years old and only just kind of started seriously watching movies when I was 15 and 16. I hadn't seen anything like that. That mix of that kind of brazen, over-the-top style, the music, that really just attention-grabbing filmmaking, having captions and freeze frames and split screens, and it kind of opened my eyes to a new style I hadn't ever really seen before. Now, I'm not saying it hadn't been done before, I'm just saying that for me, it was my first experience with that type of filmmaking. And so, like I said, I still look back on that one fondly. And that kind of sent me on a dive into who is this guy? I haven't seen anything like this. Saw Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, enjoyed that one as well. I will admit that his filmography in general is a little shaky. He started off really strong, really unique, really interesting. I only just recently, literally within the last month, watched Swept Away, and frankly, that movie's awful. Probably one of the worst movies I've ever seen in my life. Kind of amazing considering some of the offensive material in that movie that he still was able to make movies afterwards. There's some really questionable, pretty terrible material in that film, just from a moral standpoint. Never mind dealing with criminals and murder and thievery and stuff in these other movies, those are all still presented mostly as jokes and fun and lighthearted. Like Swept Away, we're supposed to laugh about sexual assault. We're supposed to laugh about someone taking on a master and slave dynamic. Like it's not funny, and it's also, like I said, just frankly offensive. So anyway, that one thankfully was kind of a one-off. He never returned to any of that type of material again. And then with Revolver, Rock and Rolla quickly got back to his own style and his own stories. And then we go right into the big blockbusters, Sherlock Holmes, the Sherlock Holmes sequel, and then follow that up. His biggest break between movies was between 2011 and 2015. And, you know, at the very end credits of Rock and Rolla, there's a caption that says, you know, these characters are going to be back. And he had originally conceived it as a trilogy. And I was reading an interview where, you know, this is probably from like 10 years ago, where he basically said, you know, I keep getting these big projects, and so I just don't have the time to take on, you know, a smaller thing or even to continue that story. So I don't know if he's still intending to return to that world. You know, it's almost 20 years later, so probably not. But the biggest gap was 2011 to 2015, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., which was a flop at the time, but kind of an underrated, I don't want to say masterpiece. Masterpiece is a strong word, but it's a really good movie. Like, it's gorgeous, and it just kind of reestablished him as a like filmmaker and his aesthetic, his style. So that one, if you haven't seen it, definitely worth your time. And then, you know, kind of again hit or miss with King Arthur. Aladdin's a very strange call. Now it's not as far out of left field as Swept Away, but I would never have picked or even thought of Guy Ritchie to direct a live-action version of a Disney cartoon starring Will Smith as kind of a musical, kind of rapping. It doesn't really work, in my opinion. I was not a big fan, but was glad to see him kind of get back to, again, his kind of comfort zone with The Gentleman, Wrath of Man, even though it's more serious and more of a drama, still, I think, an underrated gem. These last few have not, unfortunately, not been too good. So he seems to kind of be in this cycle where he'll get something really strong and that seems to be really playing to his strengths and in his wheelhouse, and then a movie or two which are not as good or maybe even bad, and then, you know, come back with something else that's strong and back to kind of what he seems to get the most mileage out of. And then, you know, we're on a break where it's not so great. I think the big problem is, as good as he is at these crime comedies and these capers and heist films, he's not very good at action. So I'm watching the Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, and it's supposed to be a comedy, but it's supposed to be an action comedy. And the problem is that the action scenes are very poorly done. Like, almost, not, I don't want to say unwatchable, but coming in 2024, after we've gotten used to, you know, John Wick and The Matrix and The Fall Guy and all Atomic Blonde, these kind of big, like, action set pieces that are really well choreographed and really carefully made. And then we have this, which is a lot of like insert shots and awkward close-ups and, you know, actors just kind of walking from place to place. It just doesn't have any sense of urgency, or it doesn't have any fun to it, any energy to it. So I'm hoping, since we've kind of been on this cycle of, you know, Operation Fortune wasn't very good, The Covenant was okay. It seemed to be his take on like Oscar bait. And then the Ministry movie, those were not so hot. So I'm hoping maybe we'll be bouncing back with something strong in 2025. I guess I'll have to update this when we get to that point. But it's been an interesting career because he started off so strong and with such like a distinct voice. And then within a decade or two, let's see. Yeah, within just a few years was kind of on the corporate train, and then a few years after that seemed to be struggling. He's kind of become like this journeyman filmmaker, which is a little interesting. Like, oftentimes you think of these directors as, you know, they kind of get a foot in the door and then they can establish a bit more clout and a bit more control and kind of take on the projects they're really passionate about. And he seems to be kind of going the opposite route, where he started off with these big kind of passion projects and, again, a really unique, bold voice that seems to have kind of gotten down where almost you can't even recognize it. Like, you would have never guessed watching Aladdin that that's a Guy Ritchie movie. Even Operation Fortune or The Covenant, it's got his name literally in the title because they didn't want it to be confused with another movie. That one it doesn't really have a lot that says Guy Ritchie in it. So I'm hoping he can kind of reestablish himself. I'm hoping he can kind of get back to the things that he's really good at and really interested in. And I'm rooting for the guy. You know, I was a fan early on. Here we are 25 years later. I can't believe it's been that long. And I'm still in his corner rooting for him to hopefully get back to it. So, you know, I hope this was interesting. I'm sorry I've been prattling on here, but I care about the guy. I hope that he gets it back together and is able to, you know, give us another fun ride. Again, my name's Jacob. This has been Mad Crazy Reviews. We've been talking about Guy Ritchie and his career. If you've enjoyed this, you know, please check out the other videos. I've got another director spotlight. I've got a lot of original content on the YouTube channel and on Instagram. And, you know, we've got a lot of written content, a lot of written reviews over on Substack. So, again, Jacob, Mad Crazy Reviews. Check out YouTube, check out Instagram, check out Substack. I'm all over there. And hope this has been fun. I hope this has been interesting. And please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for